Good morning. It is Thursday. It is officially the busiest time of the year. Gabe DeArmond here, publisher of PowerMizzou.com. Our weekly show, we have spent Thursday afternoons previewing Missouri football for the last 6-7 weeks, but we are changing the time this week to start off with a little basketball, and we're bringing in Drew King from I want to say Mountain Grove, Alabama. Does that sound like where you're at?
Mountain Brook, Gabe.
Mountain Brook.
Get
I knew it
get
was
it
mountain
together.
something. Yeah, I could have just said Birmingham, but I tried to be
Yeah.
cute. That doesn't normally work. But Drew spent yesterday at Mizzou Men's Basketball Media Day. The 14 women's teams taking the stage sometime later today. Mizzou goes about 2:00. So, Drew, it's not quite the spectacle that they make of football media days, but a chance to kind of hear from everybody. And I don't know, it always sneaks up on me. It seems really weird that it's like 3 weeks from basketball season.
Yeah, I mean, especially because we're pretty deep into football season right now, right? And so I get that it can definitely get kind of sidetracked that basketball's coming up, and a lot of people, tend to not tune in until conference play. But we're less than a month away from tip off with, the second year of head coach Dennis Gates, and so yeah. Basketball Media Day, I think, is a pretty good reminder that it's coming up for sure.
Well, and here's what I found, even like it's my job. And I generally like if Missouri football is not playing well, I turn my attention to basketball a little bit sooner. When Missouri is good at football, like they have been for the last 2 months, it's like bragging rights before I feel like I know what's going on. But that's part of the
Yeah,
reason that when we kind of reorganized stuff last year, I wanted to have somebody that covered football and somebody that's exclusively focused on basketball, so we can give them both attention. It allows me to not really pay attention until probably November 10th. But I know you put in a good amount of research on everybody in the SEC and all the transfers and everything to be part of the preseason poll. They announced the media poll, I think, on Tuesday, and Missouri
hmm
was picked ninth, which doesn't surprise me. I said last week I think they'd be picked between 8th and 10th, and that's right where they were. I think you had them 6th, and I
hmm
think that's probably having had a front row seat to what Dennis Gates did last year. He gets a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in that vote.
definitely. And then on top of that too, we've gotten to see a couple, or I've gotten to see a couple of practices of theirs, right? And so I have a little bit more firsthand knowledge on the newcomers that are coming in and how they fit into the system. And so I am a little bit higher on Mizzou than consensus. But yeah, I think that Mizzou's going to be kind of right there in the middle of the pack of the SEC.
Mhm.
But I also don't think a finish in the top half of the conference, is going to be out of the question for them, even without, Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge.
And I do want to let you guys know, first of all, comments, questions, all that. Appreciate those of you who are joining us live here. Put those in. We'll put them up on the screen and get to them. We're going to have Jarod Hamilton here in about 15 minutes. We're going to talk a little Mizzou, South Carolina football as well. The most important thing, I think, Jarod points out, it's nicer than the Business Center in Sacramento. We can I don't want to promise, but I think it's probably safe to say no one is going to microwave dinner in the background of this show.
Hopefully not. That would be
Got
a
major
little
issues if it
scary.
happens.
The fire alarm was going off this morning, so there could be another distraction, but I think we're
Right.
safe for now.
Yeah, we'll try to get this done in 15 minutes. We'll talk a little more Mizzou stuff here in a minute, but just kind of conference wide. First off, I think the general consensus is A&M and Tennessee are kind of preseason a cut above everybody else. I know Tennessee was picked by the league media to win. I know you picked A&M. A lot of other people have picked A&M, but fair to say those seem to be the top two teams going in.
I think at the very least they're the safest two to finish
Mhm.
pretty high, right? Both teams bring back 8 players. They both lost just one starter. Um, Tennessee still has Santiago Vescovi and Josiah Gordon-James around.
19th COVID year in not.
Yeah. He's got to be 28 years old at this point. And then like Texas A&M, like I said, they bring back 4 starters, and I also think they have probably the best point guard in the league in Wade Taylor the fourth. And so yeah, I think that those two teams, you kind of know what they are going to be. They don't have that many newcomers, and so I think that they're a pretty safe bet to finish high in the conference. And so yeah, I think those two, consensus wide, those are going to be the top 2 teams.
I think Kentucky's the biggest wild card. I mean, they have a ton of young guys. They're going back to what Cal did a few years ago. But they're all really talented young guys. So it'll be interesting to see what they are. Maybe a Kentucky team that is different in February than it is in November. I will go first on this question because I'm going to make people mad. But if there's a team that you think is maybe a little bit better than people are going to think, I think it's Arkansas. They get Trevon Brazile back. I know that won't make anybody here any happier. But Eric Musselman has kind of proven to me he's got things going pretty well. I think last year was a little weird. They went all in on Nick Smith, and it didn't really work during the regular season, but came together at the end. I think Arkansas is a team that can threaten to win this league. Is there a team that you look at and say maybe is better than people are going to think it is early? Outside of Missouri, which I think we both think.
Right. It's not necessarily a team that I think can, get a first round bye or the second round bye in the conference, finish top 4, but it's a team that I think people are really sleeping on, and that's Vanderbilt. Tyron Lawrence last year, his last 15 games was averaging like 16, 5, and 4, and shooting 60% on 2-pointers, even though he's a guard, and 45-something% on threes. And that's against SEC competition that's without Liam Robbins for the last couple of games of the season. I think that guy is just a killer. And so if he can kind of maintain that level of play, it's a real go-to guy for Vanderbilt, which I'm not sure that they've always had. On top of that, they get their starting point guard back, Ezra Manjon. They were really good when he was their starter. I think they were 17-8 last season when that happened. They also have a sophomore who Stackhouse is pretty high on, and Colin Smith. He's going to take over that perimeter spot. So I really like the returners for them. The question is, like, how good are the transfers? They've got a guy from Notre Dame, Van Allen Lubin, who was pretty highly ranked coming out of high school, but didn't necessarily make that big of an impact as a freshman. And then, I think they've got like a guy from South Dakota who's 6'8", something like that. So banking on those guys to hold down the front court, I think is going to be big for Vanderbilt. But I would be surprised if they finish bottom 4 like they were voted in the poll this year.
I think kind of the consensus here is Georgia, South Carolina, LSU are kind of in that bottom tier. Is that fair? Just kind of seeing how other people have voted and things.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And I wrote this in the column too. LSU and not Georgia,
South Carolina,
Ole Miss. Ole Miss. There we go. LSU and Ole Miss. They're both kind of counting on these second-time transfers to get waivers. That have not been ruled on yet, right? So Ole Miss has Musa Cisse and Brandon Murray. Cisse is going to be really, really good defensively for them if he gets cleared. But if not, like, you have Jamarian Sharp, and that might be your only big on the roster. And then with LSU, they've got Jalen Cook, amazing point guard from Tulane, and it could make them really good, average 20 points a game this year. But if he's not eligible to play, you're counting on a 3-star freshman as your starting point guard. So those two teams could definitely make a jump up if those guys get cleared. But if not, it might be tough sledding for them.
All right. I look at Ole Miss. I look at Chris Beard the same way I do at Dennis Gates. He's never been a head coach and not been better than people expected. So I put a lot of faith in that. Whether he should be coaching or not, he is. And I think it'll be good for Ole Miss. We've got Jarod Hamilton. We're going to make him sit in the green room for a few minutes while we hit some people's Mizzou basketball questions. We'll get to those. Keep Drew about 10 minutes on this. But before we do that, just like this is way too early, but it's what everybody wants to know. Do you look at the SEC more as like in that 5 to 6 bid range come March, or is this like a league that we could be talking about 7 or 8 teams?
I think it's the latter, to be honest with you. You look at last year, I think they got 8 or 9 teams in the tournament. And I think pretty consistently, based on, kind of the coaching hires from last year and how seriously schools are starting to take the basketball side of things, you're at least going to see, I think, the top 7 make the tournament every single year. And so, yeah, I think that the SEC, that was one of the things that Bruce Pearl talked a lot about today was like, he's really proud of how far the conference has come as a, basketball school wise. So, yeah, I think that the SEC is probably in a good spot in terms of
I know
the NCAA
earlier
tournament.
this week, like last week, Kirby Smart said every SEC football team should be ranked in the top 25. I expect the basketball coaches to start saying they should all 14 make the tournament. I mean, Dennis Gates wants 334 teams in the NCAA tournament, so we know he thinks they should all get in. We'll hit the Mizzou questions here and kind of try to do rapid fire and then get Drew out the door. He's got some work to do in Alabama this afternoon. Ross asked the question that we're going to get the most often, and I don't want this to come off as mean to you, Ross. I think it's the question that means the least. I mean, Dennis Gates is going to have a bunch of different starting lineups. He showed that last year. I don't know that it matters who the starting 5 is. So rather than the starting 5, like who do you see mid-season? Like, okay, crunch time of a game. We got to win a game. Who's my 5 guys on the floor?
Yeah. So we'll start with the returners, right? Nick Honor, America's point guard, as Blake Lavelle called him. He's going to be your calming presence. He's the leader, right? He's going to set everything up. Noah Carter, stepped up down the stretch of last season. I think he's going to be important. I think that Connor Vanover has to be one of those guys. The size that he brings, the rim protection, the rebounding at 7'5". I think that he is going to be kind of a stabilizer for everybody on that end, which they were not very stable at last year. And so those last 2 spots, it could be like any combination of guys. We've got Caleb Grill, Tamar Bates, John Tonje, Sean East, Kurt Lewis. Dennis Gates keeps talking up Caleb Brown. I'll be surprised about Trent Pierce. Yes. So yeah, it'll probably come down to like who has the hot hand that day, right? Just like last year, they would either go to Kobe or they would go to Demoy, or if those two weren't have a good night, they'd go to DeAndre Golston. So based on the last practice I saw, Caleb Grill had a pretty hot hand. So I would not be surprised if that's one of the guys that takes a spot.
And I think it'll be a matchup thing too. Some nights it might be Pierce. Some nights they might go with like East and Bates and Honor at the same time, and go smaller. It just depends. You mentioned Caleb Brown a little bit. Have you seen any of the improvement Dennis has mentioned? Look, I've got to trust Dennis that what he says that he thinks Caleb's going to be in the 8-man rotation. I mean, I don't know why he would just make it up, but I've got to see it to believe it, man. I just, if so, he's probably made bigger improvements with Caleb's game if he gets to that point than he even made with Kobe's game last year.
Yeah, and Dennis got asked about this a ton yesterday, and I'll have a story on it coming out at some point. But one of the things that he told me was it's obviously like still a long way to go for Caleb, right? We're not at the season yet, and the biggest thing for him is he has to stay consistent. And that, I think, is something that we have not seen from Caleb so far. So I think that'll be kind of the big tell is, if Caleb can stay showing what he has on the court in practice and do that in actual games, then yeah, I think that Caleb will end up being a part of the rotation.
And he'll play. I mean, Dennis is going to play everybody and give him a shot. But again, to see him, we just mentioned 9 guys that could be in the top 5, and to get in that group, it's a stretch. Joe says Kobe and Hodge were the guys last year. Who do you see stepping into that role? I'm not sure it is 1 or 2 guys.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, Noah Carter has the kind of the game, and you'd say he could take over the Kobe role, but I don't know if Noah Carter is a guy that a first team all SEC guy that you're consistently going to saying, go win us a big game.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest question with this team is because nobody has been the number one option for their team before. And so I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge is finding out who can be our go-to guy. And Gates has said it's going to be a committee approach. Kind of, if you remember the start of last season, Gabe, like they had 6 different guys as their leading scorers in their first 9 games or something like that. Because you remember, like Isaiah Mosley had a 20-point game. Noah Carter had a couple of big games. Shotton East had a couple of big games. So I think that it's going to take some time to kind of figure out who the guys are going to be in quotes when I say the guys.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it might be different guys, different games. Couple more here for Drew, and then we'll move on to football. Fair to say if Mizzou beats Memphis early in the year, they're a lock for the. No, it's not fair to call anybody a lock for the tourney on November 10th. It's just you can't do it, man.
No, I mean, yeah, second game of the year. It's a little early to say anybody's a lock for sure.
Scott wants to know Hoops team seems bigger. Yes, they do. Having a 7'5" guy will do that. But also, I mean, look, Pierce is 6'9", Aiden Shaw's back. They clearly went out and said, despite Dennis telling us all last year, we don't need a rebound. You guys keep talking about rebounding. They clearly went out in the offseason and needed to improve rebounding.
And not to mention Jordan Butler, 7-footer. And they've still got Mabor Majak for, the 5 minutes they need him against Tolu Smith against Mississippi State.
There you go. So yeah, a lot more size. So last one here. What's your opinion on this team? Been a big discussion on the board about whether this is a step forward. I mean, what's successful for this program this year?
I think that making it back to the NCAA tournament is still successful, even if it's not, being in the top 4 of the SEC and getting that double bye in the tournament. I think if you can still get one of those at-large bids, finish in the top half of the league, I think that's still a successful year. You're, kind of establishing that, we're a postseason team every single season under Dennis Gates.
I agree. Just get there. And whatever happens from there. But I think that's the goal this year. All right, we're gonna let Drew go in a minute. Want to bring Jarod onto the show while Drew's still here, in case you guys have any trash talk or anything. You just want to say hi. Anything you want to do.
Drew's my guy. Drew's my guy. Shout out to him on that column. I loved it. As soon as I saw the title, I was thinking, damn, I should have thought of something cool like that, man. So. Now, shout out to my guy, Drew. You did put that picture you smoking whatever that was because you beat me in fantasy. Just remember in real life, I beat you 11-2 in real hoops. Remember that.
Whatever it was, it is legal in Missouri. I think it was a cigar, but I don't know.
It was a cigar, and it was also an old picture. It's from like 3 years ago during the pandemic, but I like to send it every time I get a fantasy win. I think people should know Jarod tried to trade me the Cardinals' third string running back that week for Rashee Rice.
That's Jarod, one of the ones the league commissioner turns down and says, "No, you can't."
I'm not gonna lie. You gotta peep game to see if they up on what they should know. So it's cool, Drew. You passed the test. It was a test. I was helping you for the future.
Oh, I appreciate it.
All right, Drew. Awesome. Appreciate it, man. I know you'll have some stuff from the women's team and plenty of stuff from the men. You're traveling back tomorrow, so enjoy lovely Mountain Grove, Alabama. Did I get it right?
Mountain Brook.
Why do I keep calling it Mountain Grove? I'm going to call it Mountain Grove. That's what it's going to enjoy.
All right.
All right. We'll see you, man. All right, we're bringing Jarod in. Before we get to this weekend, and again, football questions, anything you want to ask, throw them in the comment section. We'll get to them. It is now official, Jarod. Next Wednesday, 5-star receiver Ryan Wingo making his announcement. A graphic was just tweeted out about that. I don't really think there's a whole lot of suspense about this one at this point. He's going to be in Columbia on Saturday, and I think we feel pretty good he's going to be in Columbia on Saturdays next fall.
Oh man, that's big time. This receiving room it's gonna be loaded. It's gonna be loaded. They still got some talented guys. They're trying to still work in, like Joshua Manning. That's someone Drink mentioned on Tiger Talk, is someone who's already played more than the 4 games. So they want to, and that's because of his special teams play. They want to get him involved in the offense since they've already kind of burned the opportunity for the red shirt. But yeah, they've got some guys. They got guys next year like James Madison from, I don't know how to, St. Thomas. It's the last
Thomas
word.
Aquinas. Yeah.
Aquinas. Okay, yeah. They got him coming in, lengthy, tall, very gifted athlete. Then you had someone like Ryan Wingo. I mean, with Luther Burden, with Theo Weiss has another year, right?
Theo Weiss has another year if he wants to use it. I did ask a friend of mine that covers the draft and stuff, and he's asked around a little bit about Theo. He said that the current temperature on Theo is he should probably take that extra year in college, but we'll see where it goes at the end of the season.
Yeah. All right, but yeah, that's just a loaded room, and it kind of reminds me of how we were talking about McCole Hardman going back to Frank Clark going back to the Chiefs, and my mindset is depth. You can never have too much depth, basically. And so for that wide receiver room to keep getting loaded, and even if some guys have to wait a little bit, I mean, it'll be well worth it knowing you've got that talent on hand.
Yeah, and so again, Wingo announcing Wednesday. We are planning to go over and stream that announcement live when we get a little bit more details about it, how everything's going to work. We'll let you guys know, obviously, early next week. And then the focus turns to what that means for CBC receiver Jeremiah McClellan, who I've reported for a long time. Like, the feeling has been if Missouri gets Wingo, it helps them with McClellan. He's visiting Columbus this weekend. He's an Ohio State commit. He's going to be up there for the Ohio State-Penn State game. We'll see where it goes after that. I think something could happen, but we'll keep our eye on it. How soon it happens, who knows? So let's turn our attention to Jarod, you're getting a shoe question. So I'll just let you answer the shoe question before we get to football, because this is out of my depth.
Okay, yeah. So Jared, thanks. Super chat. He says, Jarod, this has been on my mind since 4 down territory. Did you crease the 4s running downstairs, and which 4s were they? I don't have too many Jordans. I think I have like 2 or 3. These were the Oreo, like gray Oreo or something like that. I'm not great on the names, but it wasn't going down the stairs that was the problem. It was once I got down the stairs and you kind of got to run down the concourse, I was doing that. And then when I had to go back upstairs, did it again. Then I had to do it again to go back. So that was probably where the creasing was starting. It's making me think a lot about my shoe and suit choices, because I didn't expect to have to run like that. So, but they weren't too badly creased, but yeah, just a little bit.
I'm going to sound real old here for a minute. Like, you understand when you buy shoes, the point is to wear them, and there's going to be some wear on them, right?
You know what, guys? Gabe is much younger than he acts sometimes, but right there, Gabe, showing your age. See, you can make shoes last long if you just take care of them, and I try. I don't even really wear those shoes out for myself, and so yeah, Gabe, you don't want to crease certain shoes like that.
So you bought these shoes. I'm going to assume you didn't get them for like $15. I'm going to assume they cost you a little bit of money.
Cost a little change.
And the point is to not wear them?
No. It's not that. I mean, you see me when I go to practice into the games. I have shoes where I'm just like, they're work shoes. I just want to save them for when I'm going to be in the field or when I'm outside. I got these shoes a couple years ago. I want to make them last. I don't want to spend all this money on the shoes, and then after a year, they look like I just beat them up and they got holes, and so I want them to last. So I can't have them last if I'm creasing them and running through puddles of rain in Kentucky and all this other crap.
Well, I want to be clear. I've got like 6 pairs of shoes that I wear, and it's the most pairs of shoes I've ever owned that I actually wear in my life. So I just
to be honest, Gabe, your rotation is deeper than mine. I really only wear 2 pairs of shoes.
Okay.
So when I wear those ones and they get messed up, it's just like,
Okay. So now that we've got everybody caught up on the shoe games, game on Saturday. Look, I can't help but think, and I want to be clear, like what the fans think about the game, like doesn't matter. None of us play the game. But like, I'm just kind of getting the feeling that Missouri fans are already counting this team as 7-1 with the bye week going to Georgia. And I just think it's a little bit like I think Missouri should win. But I don't think the fan base is paying quite enough attention to South Carolina because I don't think South Carolina's awful. They could come in and win this game.
Yeah, to be honest, I felt more comfortable about last week's game in my prediction of them winning by, I think I had them winning by 13 points. I felt a little bit more confident about that one than this one, just because, I mean, Missouri was in the same position last year. I think they were 3-4 heading into this game.
And South Carolina had just beaten, I think it was like A&M and Ole Miss or somebody.
Something like that. They just became the 25th ranked team. And this is homecoming. This will be the second game in a row South Carolina's playing a homecoming. Obviously, they lost their own last week. They want to get their receipt back for last year's loss to Missouri. It's kind of setting up to be the same situation Missouri was in. Like, you go on the road, you can kind of get your season back on the tracks. So there's that. But I'm doing right before I came on here, I was doing the preview. And every time I keep doing the preview, the more homework I'm doing, I'm just like, it's not looking up so good. But then again, that's why they play the game.
Not looking so good for South Carolina.
South Carolina, as just far as some of the metrics and stats. And I know Drink was like, we don't pay attention to stats, and I'm just like, that's coach talk, because stats show trends, and
they don't pay attention to stats until a guy has a good game. Then they'll come in and tell us
how. Oh yeah. I was literally thinking that they don't. I understand you're not trying to give nobody any more bulletin board material than they already have, but South Carolina doesn't look that great on paper. But
I want to be clear. Richard Barber says, "I'm telling you to have hope, and now I'm telling you to be worried." I mean, all I'm telling you is it's sports, guys. Like, this is not South Dakota, right? This is a Power 5 football team that has actually a pretty good quarterback that on the right, like Missouri will have to be a little bit off its game. Missouri comes in and plays as well as it can. Missouri's going to win this game because Missouri's a better team than South Carolina. They played 10 times. I think Missouri beats them 7 probably, but they don't play 10 times. They play once. And if they have a bad day, if Missouri comes in, all I'm saying is, from what I've seen from the fan base, I don't think fans are thinking that there's any possibility that South Carolina comes in and wins this game. And I think it's Eli Drinkwitz's job this week to get his team to understand, look, you are not good enough to roll your helmets out and take anybody in this conference lightly. And I'm not saying Missouri's going to do that. I'm just saying it's what Drink has to guard against this week.
Yeah. I think I said this in the 3 things that may determine the game is South Carolina is similar identity-wise to LSU as far as they want to pass the ball. They want to make this a high-scoring game. That's how they'll win. Their defense isn't particularly great. LSU's pass defense wasn't particularly great. Actually, South Carolina's pass defense is the worst in the country. But you've seen LSU, they were able to make some plays. Obviously, they got those 2 interceptions. So just because stats do say one thing, that doesn't mean, something can't happen. South Carolina actually has a pretty solid run defense. So if they can kind of lock up the run, and then have a couple plays in the secondary, now you're talking about a different game. I guess this is Hefe because I have some responses. I think Hefe KC. He says South Carolina defense can't tackle. Right before I got on here, I was looking at their PFF grades. Obviously, those do not mean everything. I know that, but it said they're 32nd in tackling in the country. So they can tackle, but they're not good at tackles for loss. When they get to the backfield, they kind of have the same problem that Missouri has as far as just not finishing the play. That will be a big thing this week.
You're talking about South Carolina's run defense. What are the chances it's decent because nobody tries to run the ball against them? I mean, I can see this
that is true.
I can see this being like the LSU game where, like, midway through the second quarter, Missouri had thrown like 21 times and run like 6. I can see it being a game where Drink and Kirby Moore just say, let Brady Cook go, let him fling it all over the field. Like, they've thrown the ball a lot more than they've run it the last 4 weeks anyway. And given a matchup like this, I could see them coming out and saying, let Luther and Theo and Mookie just go win this game for us.
They should. I mean, when again a team is ranked that low, I think they're giving up over 300 yards. It's probably more than I can't think of the exact number, but it's definitely over 300 yards passing. You definitely want to say, let's do this. But you've seen again, Kentucky didn't have the greatest pass defense also, but that taking away Luther and taking away those deep plays, that may be something South Carolina may want to look at as a way to kind of limit that and force Missouri to run. And as we've seen the last 4 or 5 games, you can kind of limit this running game, especially with Cody Schrader not being 100%. You can limit that. And then once you start making it one-dimensional and you kind of dictate what Missouri does, that puts South Carolina in a good spot to kind of maybe get this game to go their way.
Yeah, South Carolina has given up 321 yards passing per game. They have allowed, I think it's 182 completions is the number. But bottom line, they've allowed the 13th most completions in college football. So they don't defend the pass particularly well. But you know what the worst part of South Carolina's run team is, I think, is their run game on offense. I mean, they are dreadful. They're 123rd in rushing yards a game, 124th in rushing yards per carry. The only weird stat is they actually have scored 10 rushing touchdowns. So they must have had a bunch of like 1 and 2 yard touchdown runs.
Yes, part of that is they're averaging with 97.8 rushing yards per game. So part of that is sacks. That's something that, sacks play a part in that in South Carolina.
And they've given up a couple of those. Yeah.
Yeah. They're 100 and so many, like they're 100 plus in so many stats. I'm kind of getting them mixed up, but they're like 117th or 120th or something in sacks allowed with 4.17. So, and I'm pretty sure when you have a passing quarterback, especially one with an arm like Spencer Rattler, sometimes they tend to take deep dropbacks, and that kind of is what goes into that total. But even if you take that out, their running game still isn't that great. Mario Anderson is kind of a story like Cody Schrader, D2 guy who's starting, leading the team in rushing. He's not – it's kind of like Cody – He's solid. His last 3 games he's been much better. His first 3 games were just like, man, but he's only averaging like 55 yards per game. And if Spencer Rattler's the second leading rusher, they shouldn't have too much trouble containing him. He's no Jaden Daniels. I'll say that.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned those sack numbers. It takes a long time to make up for giving up 9 in your first game of the season, which they did against North Carolina. I mean, even if they hadn't given up another sack all year, they're still giving up more than 1 per game. Kyle's asking, Rattler seems to kind of lack weapons besides Xavier Legette. He's a very good receiver. Do you expect Chris Abrams-Drain to shadow him? I honestly haven't noted. I just haven't looked, Jarod. Do they kind of let KAD travel with the number 1 guy, or does it look like they have more kind of, hey, this is your side of the field and that's his side of the field?
Well, I always feel like let's look at the press box view. He's always on the opposite side from where we're seeing. Like I've seen Ennis move. Okay. I've seen Ennis move around a little bit. And if Ennis is there, I don't think they need to do any of that, to be honest, if he can play. But maybe KAD does. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I feel like every time I think about him, he's always on the opposite side of us. Yeah.
Okay. Greg Shackelford says can't get down 14-0 again at home. Mizzou must get off to a good start. On one hand, obviously you don't want to give an underdog confidence. On the other hand, I don't know. They got down 14-0 and won by 21 last week. I don't know that this is a team that panics if they get behind necessarily.
That is true. But to Greg's point, being down 14 points to a Kentucky team that's really run heavy versus being down 14 points to a passing team who can kind of put those points on you quickly if you let them, if you kind of don't get that momentum, is a little bit different, just because that's going to force you to have to take more chances, both defensively and offensively. So it's a little bit different, but they shouldn't really worry too much about being down 14-0.
Andrew suggests getting down 21-0 and seeing how that goes. And just see how, like, for a minute, I thought maybe Missouri was going, I don't know, how much can we spot them and still come back? That's what Saturday in Lexington looked like to me for a minute.
I advise to not do anything.
Jason's asking about the injury report. So we don't get it till tonight. We know that Chad Bailey is out for this game. Chuck Hicks will replace him. I'll be honest, I don't think that's that big a deal. I think Hicks in the first 3 games was every bit as good as Bailey's been for the last 3. Do you disagree?
I think Chuck was definitely serviceable. I think Chad has played a little bit better than others have thought he's played. The linebacking group as a whole, though, is down compared to last year. I will say.
All right, so let me ask you about that real quick, because Drinkwitz said on Tuesday he feels like Tyron Hopper has been actually maybe more effective than he was last year. Now, is that a coach just trying to build a guy up? Is he saying something he doesn't believe, or is there something I'm not seeing? Because Tyron Hopper has more than twice as many missed tackles as anybody on this team. And I think he's missed 26% of his tackle opportunities, according to PFF. Again, I'm not going to promise those are exactly right, but missed tackles are pretty easy to spot. I'm not saying Hopper's bad, but I don't think he's been as good as he was last year.
I think it's a mix of, all things you said. I don't think he's played as well as he played last year. Somebody asked us, I want to say after the game, or maybe it was on Monday's pod, of like he's losing himself money. I don't know if he's losing himself that much money for real, but he's not playing to the same ability or level as last year. I feel like it's just hit and miss this year. With like some games, there's been a couple games where he can absolutely be a game record, the best player in the field. But I remember talking to you during the Kentucky game. We're just like, yo, he looks like the worst one on the field with as many missed tackles. I will say this. If you're missing a lot of tackles, that usually means you're in the right spot a lot of times.
Yeah.
So if you can and that's something he can clean up. That this has been an issue for about a year or so with this team. If he can clean that up, then we're not really having the same conversation. So,
and I think the other thing about what Drink said, because he said last year, we blitzed a lot more. So I think maybe last year Hopper made a lot more plays that, like, if you're just watching all 22 guys on the field, you notice that one guy. Like, he made more flash plays. But maybe this year what Drink's saying is he's playing more within the framework of the defense, and he may not be making a ton of splash plays, but like what he's doing is allowing some other guys to make plays.
Yeah, that's probably, akin to the plays that don't show up in the box score.
Right.
When you're blitzing, obviously you got to know which gaps to run through or where you're supposed to attack, but that's not as difficult, I would think, than being in coverage more or, whatever other responsibilities they're having him do outside of that. So I get what he's saying from that perspective.
Yeah, and it could be kind of analogous to, okay, Luther Burden only has 3 touches for 21 yards last week, but how much of Theo Weiss's night is because Kentucky's paying so much attention to Luther Burden? So maybe Hopper's not putting up the stats, but the coaches, when they're watching film, are seeing stuff that you and me sitting in the press box don't see.
Right.
So, all right, let's just kind of finish up with this. If this is, the bad news, if this doesn't go Missouri's way, if they lose this game, why did it happen? Like what does South Carolina have to do to come in here and pull an upset that I don't think either one of us expects them to pull?
Well, hold on. Let me go back to the injury progression because it's just still on my mind. Schrader questionable.
Right.
Rakestraw questionable. For Rakestraw, it was based off his practices. Drink seemed happy with his practice on Tuesday. He'll probably play unless game time decision. He just does what he does versus Memphis. Yeah, I wouldn't play Rakestraw. Schrader, I'd still play Schrader. I wouldn't give him the same amount of touches. He doesn't need 20 touches, but those are really the only 3 people we expect. They're going to put like 12 guys on there. There's only 3 that
Brady Cook's going to be on there every week going forward, I'm sure.
Yeah, just worry about those 3. Okay, back to your question as far as you said, what goes wrong for Missouri?
Yeah, if Missouri loses this game, what would lead to that? What did South Carolina do?
They had better pass protection, which means Missouri didn't get much pressure with 4, which they should be able to do. Missouri was the more undisciplined team. In a battle of undisciplined teams last week, they only had 3, which is a season low. Kentucky had 11, which was a season high. Same thing with these 2 teams. Both are very bad in penalties. Whoever is undisciplined is going to lose. Spencer Rattler has a pretty good day. If he's turning the ball over, I don't think there's any chance, and he has to be effective too. Can't be like, even if Devin Leary didn't have the 2 interceptions, 120 passing yards is terrible. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not good. You're not gonna beat a team of this caliber with 120 passing yards. So he's gonna have to be airing it out, being safe with the ball, and probably more poor tackling. That's gonna kill any team, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think South Carolina, because Missouri's offense has been pretty effective for about a month now. I think they'll score in the 30s. Like I expect that. So if South Carolina is going to win this game, I think it's going to take 35, 38 points.
Yep.
And if that happens, I think it means Spencer Rattler threw for 350 and 3 or 4 touchdowns. I mean, I think South Carolina's path to this game is Spencer Rattler is the SEC Offensive Player of the Week. I just think Missouri has a lot more paths to a game. And the other path to a South Carolina is real clear. Missouri just doesn't play well. And like that's possible. But if Missouri loses this game, I think at the end of this game, we're going to be going, what happened, Missouri? That's on you. That's your fault.
Right. And something I want to add, again, this was something in the 3 things that may determine the game that I just thought was interesting is the Gamecocks, they spread the ball around a lot. There we go. 6 players have recorded 10 or more reception, and of those 6, 5 have 100 receiving yards. There's like 2 players who have like 9 receptions. One of them has 120 yards. And then they have 14 people who have caught a ball, and all 14 have caught at least 2 passes. So I just think that's interesting that obviously Xavier Legette, I think that's how you pronounce it. But Legette is far and away their most targeted and best receiver, but they'll give the ball to anybody. Like they'll spread this ball around. There's Trey Knox. He's a really good tight end. And when you take Brock Bowers off the schedule, he may be the most talented tight end I can think of that they'll play. I'm trying to do off the top of my head, probably this season. He's a really dynamic receiving tight end who's physical. He can run very fast, and he's got good hands. So that'll be something the safeties and linebackers will have to watch out for.
Yep. All right, guys. Appreciate you hanging out with us on a Thursday morning. We moved the schedule a little bit to accommodate Drew, and actually also because later this afternoon I'm going over and doing an interview with Desiree Reed-Francois. So I will have some stuff from that later today and later on in the week for you guys. Kickoff 2:30 on Saturday. Homecoming, we will be there. Ryan Wingo officially next Wednesday. So again, it's crossover season every single day, man. To quote John Rothstein, we'll sleep in May. So we're counting down the days till May, but appreciate you guys hanging out. We'll talk to you next time.